The Night Terrors. The walls were breathing. In the dream, 10-year-old Leo was running down a hallway that stretched into infinity. The wallpaper was peeling like dead skin, and the floor was covered in a thick, black tar that grabbed at his ankles. He couldn't remember where he was running to, only what he was running from. Behind him, a shadow was growing. It wasn't a person. It was a shapeless void with too many teeth. It whispered his name, but the voice was wrong. It sounded like grinding metal. Leo. Leo tried to scream, but his mouth was filled with the black tar. The shadow lunged, engulfing him, and the world dissolved into static. Leo! Leo, wake up! Leo gasped, sitting bolt upright in his bed. He was drenched in cold sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The room was soft and warm. The terrifying hallway was gone, replaced by his familiar blue walls and the glow of his star-shaped nightlight. His mother, Martha, was sitting on the edge of the bed, rubbing his back in slow, soothing circles. Her face was a mask of gentle concern. His father, David, stood by the door, holding a glass of water looking worry-worn. It was the Shadow Man again, wasn't it? Martha cooed, brushing damp hair off Leo's forehead. Leo nodded, trembling. He was trying to eat me. David sighed, a sound full of sympathy. He walked over and handed Leo the water. Drink up, sport. You know what Dr. Evans said. Your imagination is just too big for your head sometimes. It spills over when you sleep. I hate it, Leo whispered into the cup. It felt so real. That's what night terrors are, buddy, David said, his voice deep and grounding. They're tricks, nasty little lies your brain tells you. But look around. You're here. You're safe. We're the fortress, remember? Martha kissed his temple. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out. We promise. They stayed until his breathing slowed. They were perfect, patient, loving, and unbreakable. When they finally left, leaving the door cracked just a smidge to let the hallway light in, Leo felt a surge of gratitude. He didn't know what he would do without them. Leo lay back down, staring at the rain lashing against his window. He tried to focus on the rhythm of the drops to keep the Shadow Man away. The rhythm changed. It wasn't the erratic patter of rain anymore. It was deliberate. Leo squeezed his eyes shut. It's the dream, he told himself. It's the overflow. But the sound didn't stop. It got louder, like bone dragging across glass. Leo turned his head slowly toward the window. The heavy curtains were drawn, but there was a gap in the middle. A flash of lightning illuminated the balcony outside. There was something standing there. Leo blinked, waiting for the image to fade like the hallway in his dream. But it stayed. It was a silhouette, hunched and twisted. It looked like a pile of wet rags that had stood up and learned to hate. The creature was pressing its face into the gap between the curtains. Leo couldn't move. He was paralyzed by the memory of the nightmare he just had. Is this real? Or am I still asleep? The creature raised a hand. It was skeletal, the skin gray and tight against the bone. It placed a long, dirty finger against the glass and began to trace a shape. A circle, then a line, then another circle. It was drawing a face. A happy face. The contrast between the horrific, rotting appearance of the creature and the innocent drawing made Leo's stomach turn. Then, the lightning flashed again, brighter this time. The creature wasn't drawing. It was pointing. It pointed at the drawing, then pointed at its own face. Its mouth dropped open, revealing a black maw with jagged, yellowed teeth. It opened its eyes wide. Too wide. They were bloodshot and frantic, rolling in their sockets like a mad animal. It slammed its face against the glass. Leo screamed. It was a high, thin sound that tore his throat. The door burst open instantly. David was there in a second, flipping on the overhead lights. The sudden brightness blinded Leo. It's there! It's on the balcony! Leo shrieked, pointing at the window. The monster! It drew a face! David marched to the window. He grabbed the curtains and ripped them open. The balcony was empty. Rain lashed against the glass. The wind howled, but there was no monster, no rags, no rotting face. David peered close to the glass, squinting. He wiped a smudge with his thumb on the inside of the glass. Leo, David said, turning around slowly. He looked sad, disappointed. It was there, Dad. It was scratching. There's nothing there, son, David said softly. He pointed to the glass. See? Just condensation. Just the rain. Martha appeared in the doorway, clutching her robe. Did he have another one? David nodded solemnly. Waking nightmare this time. He thought something was on the balcony. Martha covered her mouth, her eyes watering. Oh, my poor baby. It's getting worse. Leo stared at the window. He knew what he saw, but looking at his parents, so sane, so calm, so sad for him, he began to doubt. The dream hallway had felt real too. Maybe his brain was broken. I, I'm sorry, Leo whispered. Shh, Martha said, coming to tuck him in again. She pulled the covers tight, tighter than usual. We're going to help you, Leo. We're going to make sure you stay safe. David, she said, looking up at her husband, maybe we should use the shutters tonight, just to help him feel secure. David nodded. That's a good idea. He opened the window, just for a second, letting a blast of freezing wet air into the room, and reached out to pull the heavy storm shutters closed. As he did, Leo saw it. Just for a fraction of a second, down in the yard, near the tree line, illuminated by the floodlight David had just triggered, the figure was crouching in the mud. It was looking up at the window. It raised a hand and waved, a slow, jerky, broken wave. David slammed the shutters closed, plunging the room into darkness. There, David said, his voice sounding like a steel trap snapping shut. Locked up tight. No monsters can get in, and you can't get out to wander around and hurt yourself. The lock clicked. Then the deadbolt slid home. Leo lay in the dark, listening to his parents' footsteps fade down the hall. He wanted to believe them. He wanted to believe it was a nightmare. But nightmares didn't leave muddy handprints on the trellis. The box labeled broken. The next morning, the sun didn't rise. It just turned the gray sky a lighter shade of bruised purple. Leo sat at the kitchen table, staring at a spoon full of thick violet syrup. Open up, airplane coming in, David said. His voice was jovial, but his eyes were hard behind his wire-rimmed glasses. I don't want it, Leo mumbled. It makes my head feel like it's full of cotton. It keeps the bad dreams away, Martha said, whisking eggs at the stove. She wasn't looking at him. You screamed 3 times last night, Leo, about what did you call it? The pale thing? It wasn't a dream, Leo whispered, but he opened his mouth anyway. David poured the syrup in. It tasted like metal and artificial grapes. Almost instantly, the edges of Leo's vision went soft. Good boy, David said, patting his shoulder. I'm going to go check the perimeter fence. The storm might have knocked down a post. You stay with Mom inside. Do not open the doors. I won't. David grabbed his rifle from the rack by the door. David grabbed his rifle from the rack by the back door. A casual motion, like grabbing a set of keys and stepping out in the damp morning fog. An hour later, the medicine was making Leo feel heavy, like he was walking underwater. Martha was in the basement, the rhythmic thump-thump of the washing machine covering the sound of his footsteps. He didn't know why, but he felt drawn to the attic. The ceiling above the hallway had been creaking all morning. Not the settling of wood, but a shifting of weight. He pulled the drawstring for the attic stairs. The ladder slid down with a groan of rusty springs. The attic smelled of dry rot and mothballs. Dusty motes danced in the single beam of light coming from the small, circular skylight in the center of the roof. The space was filled with boxes. But they weren't normal boxes. They were taped shut with layers and layers of duct tape, as if the contents were radioactive. Leo crawled toward the stack nearest the light. The marker scrawl on the side read, Leo, before. His heart hammered against his ribs. Before what? He used a loose nail from the floorboard to saw through the tape. It gave way with a sticky tearing sound. Inside, there were no toys. There were clothes. A tiny pair of blue pajamas with bloodstains on the collar, a single, small sneaker, and a photo album. Leo opened the album. The pages were sticky. The photos showed a happy family, a man and a woman holding a baby. But the man wasn't David. And the woman? Leo squinted at the woman in the photo. She was beautiful, with laughing eyes and long, flowing hair. She was holding a toddler, Leo, on a swing set. He flipped the page. A close-up of the woman hugging him. On her wrist, clear as day, was a bracelet. Not gold or silver. It was a cheap, braided bracelet made of neon yarn. Leo touched his own wrist. He had a vague, syrup-clouded memory of braiding something like that. Over, under, pull. Over, under, pull. The sound came from above him. Leo froze. He slowly looked up at the circular skylight. The pale thing was on the roof. It was lying on its stomach. its face pressed directly against the round glass, looking down into the attic like a specimen in a jar. In the daylight, it was worse. Much worse. The creature's skin was peeling in wet, gray strips, revealing raw flesh underneath. Its hair was gone in patches, leaving a scabbed scalp exposed to the cold air. But the eyes were the same color as the woman's in the photo. The creature didn't scream this time. It saw Leo holding the photo album. Its expression crumbled. It wasn't rage. It was a grotesque, contorted mockery of grief. The creature slammed its open palm against the skylight glass. It lifted its hand. There, pressed against the glass, was a smear of dark, viscous blood. And on its wrist, embedded into the swelling, infected flesh of its arm, was a filthy, mud-caked bracelet made of neon yarn. Leo looked at the photo, then at the monster. The monster opened its mouth. Its tongue was black and swollen. It pressed its lips to the glass and mouthed the word. Leo couldn't hear it, but he saw the shape of the lips. Run. Suddenly, the creature's eyes widened in terror. It scrambled backward, crab-walking across the roof shingles with an unnatural speed, disappearing from view. Leo? The voice came from the bottom of the ladder. It wasn't loud. It was terrifyingly quiet. Leo slammed the box shut and shoved it behind a stack of old newspapers. He spun around. David's head was poking up through the attic hatch. He wasn't smiling. The light from the hallway below cast his face in shadow, turning his glasses into two opaque white circles. What are you doing up here, Leo? David asked. His voice was flat. Dead. I heard a squirrel, Leo stammered, the lie tasting like ash. On the roof. David climbed fully into the attic. He stood up, brushing dust off his pristine khakis. He looked at the skylight, then he looked at Leo. He took a step forward. The floorboards groaned under his weight. A squirrel? David repeated. He took another step. He was too big for the room. He loomed over Leo. You know the rules about the attic, Leo. It's not safe. There are nails, splinters, sharp things. He reached out a hand. Leo flinched. David paused. A flicker of something cold passed through his eyes. Annoyance, suspicion. Then the mask slipped back into place. The warm, fatherly smile returned, but it looked like it was painted on a statue. Come on, buddy, David said, his grip on Leo's shoulder tight enough to bruise. And after that, I think we need to up your dosage. You're seeing things again. Squirrels don't sound like people, Leo. As David marched him toward the ladder, Leo looked back at the skylight one last time. The monster was gone, but on the glass, the smear of blood was still there, and right next to it, etched into the ground by a jagged fingernail, was a single symbol. An arrow pointing at David. Leo sat at the dinner table. He felt sick. The syrup was working faster now, making his limbs numb. Eat up, Martha said, placing a plate of meatloaf in front of him. It's your favorite. Leo looked at the meatloaf. It looked like gray sludge. Dad? Leo asked, his voice slurring. Yes, son? David was cutting his meat with surgical precision. Why do I have a scar on my knee? David stopped cutting. The knife scraped against the porcelain plate. You fell off your bike, Leo, when you were 6, before the accident? I found a picture, Leo mumbled. The words were tumbling out before he could stop them. The drugs were making him loose. In the attic. I was on a swing. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. The refrigerator stopped humming. The clock stopped ticking. Martha slowly set down her fork. She looked at David. David put his knife down. He took off his glasses and cleaned them on his shirt. His eyes, without the lenses, looked small and beady. Martha, David said softly, I think the leak in the attic is worse than we thought. We'll need to board it up tonight. And the boy? Martha asked, her voice void of any motherly warmth. David put his glasses back on. He smiled at Leo. It was a predator's smile. He's just tired. He's going to sleep in the basement tonight, where it's quiet, where no squirrels can bother him. Leo tried to stand, to run, but his legs wouldn't work. The syrup. Time for bed, Leo, David said, standing up. As his father came around the table, Leo realized the horror wasn't the thing on the roof. The horror was the man reaching out for him with soft, manicured hands.